You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 258 of the Cantina Cast, where tonight we'll be going back to the recent Darth Vader comic, specifically the 2017 run and the story arc called The Chosen One. And speaking of immaculate conceptions, please welcome back to the show after yet another visit to the House of Mouse, Jonesy, welcome back.
I appreciate it. Glad to be back. It's been a fun last several days, and it's actually been it's going to be a fun next few weeks too. We've got a lot of great things to talk about.
Yeah. So just real quickly, not to put you on the spot, but what was did you get any, exclusives, any breaking news that you picked up at the theme parks that you can share with us tonight?
I wish, man. We did spend some time down at Toy Story Land this time. And again, it's really cool just to see Galaxy's Edge just continue to pick up steam. But there's some great Twitter accounts out there if you want to go see what's going on in Disneyland, where they're going to roll that out here in just the next few months. And you got the Falcon and everything. But no juicy scoops this time. No blurry cam shots. Nothing interesting like that.
Yeah. Well, sorry to hear that. I want to thank you too for posting the pics that you post, because I can't afford to take my kids to Disneyland or Disney World. So we gather around the TV every time you go, and we just kind of act like we're there with you.
Well, your presence is definitely felt.
So thanks for doing that. All right, well, let's do this. We're going to get to the news, and after that, we'll jump right into the comic series. And I guess we're going to start on kind of a bit of a down note, just because we didn't get a chance to really cover this because we were both away and we had the holidays and all. But we did have the passing of Stan Lee, and it should be no surprise that Stan Lee left his mark on just about every type of media that's out there, every IP that you can possibly think of, whether it's DC, Marvel, Star Wars, Star Trek. In some way, some form, some fashion, that man had his hand in the creativity of all of the stuff that we love as fans. And I can't stress that enough, as
right.
Maybe as dramatic as that may sound. But when I saw this, I was taken a little back, but at the same time, I mean, this guy just had the biggest smile on his face all the time. You got to know that he lived an amazing long life. I think of 94 years?
Yeah, mid-90s. It's incredible.
So yeah, I don't know, Jonesy, if you got anything else that you want to say. We don't want to spend too much time on this, but we definitely want to acknowledge the fact that Stan Lee passed, and all of our grievances to him and his family, and
right.
And thank you for everything that he did. I mean, because I know I just passed it on to you, but I was going to say one last thing. This was the guy that growing up and being a comic book fan, and spending every last penny that I had on whatever I could get my hands on at the convenience stores, every week as the comics came out. It was something to open those comics and see his face in the comics, because he was present. He was there was a animated picture of him somewhere throughout most of those comics during the late 70s and early 80s, and then he just became the figure. I mean, he was synonymous with me in terms of Spider-Man and Hulk and everything else. He was a living comic book character for me growing up. And then, to see him pass, it was pretty hard to take, honestly.
Yeah, he was a mainstay in our house. I am a huge Spider-Man fan, and my brother was a huge X-Men fan. And as far as I'm concerned, his hand in creating those characters and those books cannot be understated. Spider-Man's the quintessential, one of the most popular characters ever created, because he's kind of the everyman and every woman type of character, where it's just another person trying to do something with their lives in a meaningful way. And then the social commentary aspect of the X-Men series and what it meant when they released that book, and just, and what it taught us over time. And we didn't even know it as kids, growing up in the 80s and 90s, reading these books, we still didn't quite understand maybe what it was trying to teach us and tell us when it was originally, drawn up, I think in the 60s, right? It was when X-Men came out. So it's such an amazing that these things can come out of these fantastic mediums, and folks like Stan Lee have the ability to blend a cultural type of thing and simple, ideologies of how we should be and how we ought to be into something that's entertaining and beautiful to read and interesting and fun at the same time. And it's always nothing short of amazes me. And so it's definitely going to miss Stan Lee. I know he wasn't necessarily creating anything, but just seeing his face around was an immense pleasure. Every time you just caught sight of him, he always seemed to be enjoying life to the fullest.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to miss his cameos for sure in the Marvel universe.
Well, I have a feeling they've probably recorded a ton of those. So we'll be getting him. And I think this would be like an Easter egg thing when they run out of those as well. So I think they're going to get creative with how they keep that, how they keep him involved.
I mean, knowing that guy, he probably signed something that said, do whatever you need to do to ensure that I'm still in the movies some way. I don't care if I'm CGI, you get another actor,
right?
Put me in the thing. Just
do whatever needs to be done.
Yep. Right.
But we'll miss you, Stan Lee.
Yep. Okay. So the big news, if you have not heard, and if you're a listener of the show, avid listener or not, you should know by now. We were selected to be on the podcast stage next year at Star Wars Celebration. So this is pretty big news. We turned in the application like hundreds of other shows out there, and I don't think we're ready to spoil the content just yet. But again, we will be at Star Wars Celebration. We'll be doing a live show. We're hoping that all of you will come out, or most of you can come out. And if you are there, come by, see the show, and definitely stay after or even before and say hello to us. So I don't have the dates in front of me. I think it's in April. That's how plugged in I am on this.
Yep, 11th to the 15th.
Yep, April 11th to the 15th. So we will have. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we've already started getting the website ready on eargluemedia.com. You can do eargluemedia.com/SWCC, and we'll have news and we'll post as we start to get organized for events and after hours types of things. And we'll have a little sign up sheet if anybody's interested in letting us know they're going to be there. So we'll continue to push that, and we'll let you guys know through the podcast as well what to expect and how to get in touch with us if you think you're going to be there and you want to get together and chat, have a drink, and we'd definitely love for everyone to show up as soon as. We don't have all the dates and times of when we'll be broadcasting or when we'll be presenting, but as soon as we do, we'll make sure we let everyone know.
And if that's not enough, I think we've talked about doing some kind of some swag too. So if you come by, we'll have maybe something to hand you or wear. I haven't not saying exactly where you'll wear this or what you'll wear, but we may have something for you to wear. Yeah, it's working. It's working. All right. So yeah, more details to come on that. So look for that. I guess another kind of a big milestone for us that happened just recently too, that we threw out on social media, is that we were invited to be part of the Pandora podcast beta. So there's, as some of you may know, Pandora is prolific in terms of some of the online streaming music services out there, one of the largest ones, and they are now getting into the podcast space. So the Cantina Cast is one of the first shows that will be available on that new network, which I believe is launching next year. I don't think I have the date in front of me. Actually, I think it's out now, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So the beta is live. They did an invitation. We had provided a link for everyone to go sign up, I think in a previous show. And we've got this on the website as well. But you can go and sign up for VIP access. It doesn't really mean you don't have to have a premium account. You can do it the free account, and you sign up, and basically they'll send you an email. And these emails have started going out here in the last few days that said, hey, we've turned this onto your account. All you have to do is go into the app and you'll see a podcast area now. So it's really that simple to do it. It looks like we might be the only Star Wars podcast on there right now. So that's kind of cool and terrifying at the same time. But there are a couple caveats though. They are not enabling search. So you can't just type in Cantina Cast or Star Wars and find podcasts. So right now, the best way to go find us is to go into the categories, or all podcasts in the categories. And we're in the TV and film area, and just scroll through there until you find us. There's about a little over 400 shows in Pandora right now. So it's not overwhelmingly large, but I'm hoping they change their minds about this initial search, especially when they open the floodgates and they start letting people in, because this will be very difficult to manage to find the content you want, they're really stressing their podcast genome project, which is supposed to help you discover content based on your preferences. So if you're a Pandora user, you use the little, thumbs up and thumbs down, and it starts to learn your behaviors over time. They want to apply that to podcasts so that they can recommend things that, fit your ideal podcast and your listening interests. So very cool concept. We're going to see how well it goes. But if you want to check us out and listen to us through Pandora, we'd appreciate that as well.
Yeah. And so shout out to all the Pandora users that will be joining and listening to the show through those means. And I have to say, I'm an idiot because I was telling Jonesy before we came on the air, I'm like, where's my stinking invite to listen to the Cantina Cast? I've been a member of Pandora since 2000, literally like weeks, months after this thing launched. I was there with I don't even know, it was probably a 486 computer or something, but I signed up for Pandora, waiting, for 18 years for my invite here for podcasts. And turns out you actually have to go sign up. And I totally missed that part. So don't be an idiot like me. Go sign up so you can get the show and get it into your collection and start listening to it that way.
I don't quite know why they're doing it that way. It seems a little unnecessary, but at least it's all through the Pandora app. So you don't have to go and download a different app or anything crazy like that. But yeah, it's a little odd why they went about it that way. Again, trying to really control access for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
But on to real Star Wars news now.
Yeah, right. Now, real stuff. We got a new show coming out. In fact, premieres tomorrow. We're recording this on the 29th. But November 30th, we'll see the birth of a new show called Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures. And it's basically the original dialogue, some of the original sound effects, although based on the trailer we saw, that it sounds like they've added in some newer sound effects as well.
Right.
And they've put all of this now to some updated and very brilliant, I mean brilliant and bright animated type animation. And so this came out of nowhere, honestly. I mean, we were sitting here doing nothing, waiting on nothing, and they kind of just dropped this. And I'm not trying to overplay the importance or of this show, but it was something enough that it got me excited. And I'm the one that posted on the social media saying this is all very exciting, because in reality, for me, it was very exciting. And before I turned over to you, I just want to say a couple things about the show, because we had a really good kind of exchange on Discord as soon as this thing launched about whether or not this was relevant. Should it even be out there? Is it good? Is it bad? That kind of thing. Here's my thing. This is something that we've talked about on the show, and I've mentioned this probably several times, most recently in the last 6 months or so. But one of the things I've always had a trouble with the billion of kids that I have, I can't get them to really, truly enjoy, A New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi in the way I did. And that's not saying anything about the story. That's not saying anything about the characters. The problem I have, the hurdle has always been for them, and they've been very open about it, is it looks a little dated for them. They're more into, and I've said this before, they're more into the sequel trilogy. Even the original, the prequel trilogy hasn't been something that's been just as accessible as it was for me growing up. And when I showed them this trailer, even when I saw it, I thought this is going to rock their socks. I went home, put it on the TV, and they were blown away. They are so excited about this, more than I've ever seen them excited about the original trilogy, because of the updated animation and the graphics. And when I told them that it was the original voices and the original sound effects, their eyes lit up like, wow, that's so cool that they were able to do that. They got it. And I think this is genius on Disney's part to do something like this, because it's not, this is how you make it really a smart move to not have to reboot something, but still make it fresh again. Right. And I think that's essentially what they've done. The component of this that we got into was the brilliance in putting this on YouTube. My kids and a lot of the other the youth that I interact with almost on a daily basis in my personal life, they don't watch TV unless we force them to as adults sometimes. They are all about the YouTube, right? And they talk about my favorite YouTuber is this, or my favorite YouTuber is this person. The minute they heard that there was a new YouTube channel called YouTube or Star Wars Kids, and that this show was going to be on that channel, their heads blew off. They were exponentially excited about the fact that this is something they were going to be able to consume going forward. So
Right.
I'm pretty excited about this. And I know, again, my kids are, and I think it's a really, really smart move on Disney's part.
I was shocked because like you said, this came out of nowhere. It was like, what? Like, I mean, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. We had talked about something like this before. I think when we were getting some of the Resistance teasers, and we had seen some X-Wings, and I think I had shared that I've got these Acme Archive Carousel and character keys that they went back and redid some of the original trilogy in this animated art, and it's very brilliantly colored, like you were saying.
Yes.
And I was like, man, I've always wanted that. And then I was beside myself. I couldn't believe it. Like, not only are we potentially getting that, but now we're getting it with the original voices. And I got to be honest, at first, the meshing of the new animation and the original voices felt a little disconnected for me, and it was a little disorienting. And I think that's just mainly me, or maybe our generation of trying to say, I'm seeing something very different than what I expected.
Right.
And it wasn't until we got to the Obi-Wan scene where he's talking about the Jedi, and Luke has it in his hand, that it started to really gel and come together for me a little bit. And I got on board. And then the Han and Chewie scenes, how about this? And it was just perfect. And it was just, this is going to be so much fun. I have so many questions, and I'm glad we don't have to wait long to do it. And they're launching a whole new channel for Star Wars Kids. And this is an important milestone for us, for our newer generations of kids to understand what Star Wars meant to us. And like you said, this is a way to bridge those two worlds, to where you capture the performances, but you modernize the visual aspects of that. And I know this is going to rub some people the wrong way, because we treasure what we have, and we would love for the kids to sit down and watch a 2 to 2.5 hour movie that means so much to us. But the reality is that those opportunities are fewer than further between. I might be failing at parenting. That's probably true anyway. But
right.
But at the same time, if this is a way to get my daughter interested in Star Wars, then I'm going to take that opportunity and say, and I've already told her, hey, I'm kind of looking at this cool thing, and I want you to check it out. And she's kind of giving me the head shake. But like you, if she sees this and she sees these updated visuals and the more, exciting movements and the quicker movements, they are very out of character from what we know in the movies. There's no refuting
about it. Right.
It's like when Luke gets the lightsaber, he's swinging it around, doing twirl and all.
Yeah.
We know none of that crap happened, but it's okay. It's interesting. Let's see what they do with it. And because right now it's the saturation of the colors, the sound effects are there, the acting is going to be there, because it's the acting that we love, and we're going to get this across. I think we even saw some Rogue One footage, and I think even a little glimpse of Solo: A Star Wars Story. So this might be all over the place.
Yeah.
And so I want to see, I don't know. Do we know how long the episodes are going to be? Do we know anything?
I haven't really I've not had a chance to kind of dig in. And I don't know that they've done it, because even on just the loose looks that I've had on, social media and that thing, I don't think I've ever come across anything, and I could be wrong, but we'll definitely find out. By the time this show comes out, we'll know firsthand how long these things are going to be. And I guess just one last thing, the closest thing I could do, and I threw this out in Discord the other day too, or yesterday when we were talking about this, was the analogy I gave was this was very much like the Wizard of Oz for me growing up, and that's how my kids see the original trilogy. As a kid, that was kind of forced down my throat all the time. My parents wanted me to watch it. It's a great movie. It's brilliant. This is what we grew up with. You're going to love it. And from a story perspective, yeah, it's amazing. The characters, the actors, they're all great. I could never really get past the visuals of The Wizard of Oz, as amazing as that was for the time, in the 30s. It didn't hold up for me as a kid.
Right.
I could see the difference, and it was a big turnoff, and I never really cared to watch it much. And if it was on TV, my parents were sitting down and I was off doing something else. It wasn't until I got a little bit older that I really was able to kind of appreciate older movies and classics and that kind of thing, where I would sit down and I actually absolutely love The Wizard of Oz today. But this is this is Star Wars. I guess the original trilogy is The Wizard of Oz for my kids and probably a lot of youth. And so I think this is again a very smart way to make that accessible and to make it fresh and new and exciting and get them interested in it. You know, maybe later down the road they dive into the original trilogy, much like I did in my later life with The Wizard of Oz. So anyways, it's all very exciting. We'll know here again by tomorrow what that's going to look like. And I don't know that we're going to be coming back and dissecting any of this stuff for in any great detail whatsoever. But certainly if there's anything there worth mentioning, we'll be sure to bring it back onto the show as part of news.
Yeah, we'll start a new Star Wars Galaxy of podcasts.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to go
I'm
well.
kidding, probably.
Yeah. No, yeah, Mike's probably shaking his head.
All
right. Well,
let's do this.
Let's do this. We've got, news went a little bit long because we were out 2 weeks. So, but let's get into this. We're going to get right into the Chosen One arc series. And again, this is just to recap kind of where we're picking up here. There was the original Darth Vader series that came out in, was it 2015?
Right.
And we did the first arc on that a couple shows ago. We're going to jump ahead to the 2017 arc, and there's 25 issues total. This is still running today. In fact, I think issue 24 came out last week, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And so we've got one issue left in coming out in December. And just as a quick plug, we will be coming back and covering that Fortress Vader arc, which is the last part of that, which deals a lot with Mustafar and the Fortress and all of that. But more on that in a second, because we are going to touch on that as part of this discussion. But this series, again, this is just starting with issue number 1, picks up immediately from the moment that Vader is now Darth Vader. He's risen off the table and, finds out that that he allegedly killed Padme in his rage and that sort of thing. So it takes place immediately after that transformation in Revenge of the Sith. And we're going to cover the first 6 issues only. So the full story arc is called the Chosen One, which I think they combined them into kind of a trade, and they renamed the trade Imperial Machine.
Right.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about, I guess, both of those probably at the very end and the names, because there's something a little maybe misleading in terms of the story arc being called the Chosen One. So with the creative teams, you've got Charles Soule. So he had already done, I think, Poe Dameron and some of the other, what was the other one? Was it Afra? I forget now. He did another one, another Star Wars comic.
He's been in so many. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the premier Star Wars writer right now in the comics. Yep.
We've got Giuseppe Cumuncoli. I don't even know him by that. I know he goes by Camo. And that's about it. Cam Smith is the inker. The colorist is David Carell. The letterer is Joe Caramagna. Yep. The cover artist, and there are some really great covers, honestly, for most of these comics, and well, really all of the Star Wars comics, but this particular series has got a lot of different variants, which are really, really cool. But you got Jim Cheong, Matthew Wilson, Olivier Copiel, and he's like one of my favorites. He did a run of Thor a few years back that's just, absolutely gorgeous to see, and some of the covers that he's done for this one are just mind-blowing, honestly, in my opinion. You got Camo, who did a couple of the covers as well, and then is it Francesco Mattina?
Yeah,
I hope I got that right.
Or Francesca, I can't remember. Yep,
maybe it's Francesca. Yeah,
I think it's probably my typo. Sorry.
That's all right. And then the editors are Jordan White and Heather Antos. So let's start with the arc. And so again, we're really gonna try to stay away with the comic book coverage. This isn't so much a review, and we're definitely not gonna hit every single panel and every action and talk about every and that kind of thing. But we definitely want to talk about maybe some of the more interesting parts, and then really kind of tie that back to, past and present type experiences, with other characters, even Vader himself in this one specifically. But let's just start from the very beginning, because again, this does kind of kick off right at the very beginning. It's almost, I don't want to say it's a retelling. We were kind of talking about this with the Star Wars Adventures, but or Galaxy Adventures. It's almost kind of like a retelling, because in the first couple of panels, he finds out that he allegedly, again, killed Padme, and immediately something's different. He goes off, like he rages. The No that we're familiar with in the movie is very different. But did you take any issue with this kind of, I don't want to say it's a different point of view or a retelling, but it was definitely not what we saw in Revenge of the Sith. Did you take issue with this? Because I know this, when it first came out, there were a number of people, whether it was podcasts, YouTube, articles on the web, Twitter accounts, whatever, everything was, a lot of people were blowing up about this, that this was very different. How could they have gone and retold this the way that they did?
Yeah, there was a little bit of controversy that went with it. I liked it. I've always been more flexible with books and comics and that type of thing. I've always treated the movies as kind of the movie, and that's the definitive story, and these enhance it. And I was okay with a little bit of creative liberty. And it's about the execution that they do it. And the way that they went about this was, in my opinion, what we probably all wish we would have seen on screen. So it wasn't necessarily retconning what we saw on screen. It was more, you could treat it more of a continuation of what we did not see in the movie, which is how I chose to view it. But again, I think everybody would have been, their socks would have been knocked off after a fantastic fight with Obi-Wan. To see something like this happen, I think would have got everyone really riled up and excited again. And of course, then the movie ends, and you would have been disappointed that the movie ended. But
right.
I thought this was great. The way that they drew Palpatine in particular, and the facial expressions that he had, and the dialogue was incredible. And Vader's unleashing of his power, and to actually forcibly, I'm going to say hurt, but, to impact Palpatine and throw him was incredible to me. And really, it floored me the first time I read it. How did you feel whenever you came across this for the first time?
So I think the first time I was maybe a little shocked, but I wasn't surprised because like you, it's a comic book, and I think I did not expect them to, go shot for shot. Why would I want that? If I'm going to pick up a comic book, I don't want to see a shot for shot, especially when things are done like this, when they do movie adaptations. I want to see different perspectives, different angles,
right.
Maybe an artistic take. I don't mind all of that so much. To me, and I think this is maybe kind of what you're saying too, this felt a little bit more appropriate. Like, this seems like more realistic, like what we would expect from Vader, being as powerful he is in the Force, having just gone through what he did and raging the way he did. We would get something like we saw maybe from, the Force Unleashed, where, Palpatine is knocked back in the manner that he is. So this doesn't feel out of character. I didn't really have a problem with it. I thought what was really interesting here in this particular scene, there's one panel in there where you get the sense that Vader is so mad that he's actually trying to choke the Emperor. I mean, there's a scene in there, one panel where he's actually holding his hand,
right,
and he's got his fingers together, right, and he's kind of doing that. And it's interesting because right after this happens, he's talking. You got the Emperor talking to Vader as though everything's kosher, right? And immediately after that, he starts laying into him with the Force lightning. And that was the part that was a little shocking for me. And maybe it shouldn't be, because now that we've talked about, we've done this series, we did the series before, we've, talked about Palpatine to death in terms of just how much of a sadistic person he is.
Right.
But this doesn't seem out of character, but I think it was still surprising that he, in that moment, right after everything kind of cooled down, he's having this casual conversation, that suddenly he just unleashes on him with this Force lightning, which again just plays up on how crazy this guy is and how much he likes to exert his control, over Vader. And there's two purposes. I think that's one of them, and obviously it's to set up the main storyline for this arc, because at this moment, when the Emperor's, letting loose on him with all the Force lightning, he's basically taunting him, telling him, "Hey, pull out your lightsaber, defend yourself."
Right.
Typical Anakin, he doesn't have his lightsaber, so Palpatine backs off on the lightning, and so starts the story. And the story really at this point is about, now Vader needs to go out and he has to acquire a Sith lightsaber, something for him to use. And just quickly, the whole point of, again, the storyline here is that he's trying to go find the lightsaber, and that Palpatine says that the best way, that the preferred way, I guess, really is to go out and find a lightsaber from a Jedi, right? And that's kind of where we go with the first 6 issues.
Yeah, there's some great dialogue in all of this, and to roll back just a touch, Vader said, "You told me you could save her," so you start to get this betrayal, right? And Palpatine has these retorts, and he's almost amused in some scenes, and then a bit wretched in some of the others. In your rage, you chose a different path. but she gave him a gift. So will you use it or will you die? And he's got this giant smile on his face. Palpatine does, and it's just, like you said, the sadistic side of him of, twisting the truth a bit and bending Vader to his will constantly and putting him in. And you're right. The setting up of the story with the lightsaber, again, the quote from Palpatine is really interesting just to continue setting that up. When he asks him where where it is, Vader comes up with an excuse. It's still very much Anakin, and he's trying to beat this out of him while he's force lightning him, saying, I lost it with Obi-Wan, and he just screams, no, Palpatine does. That belonged to another, a Jedi. And it just set up of trying to break Anakin break Vader away from Anakin, right, and start to transition, can keep him transitioning away from this former life and have him embrace this, because this is a really critical time for him, even more so than when he first was convinced to change in Palpatine's office. And so this is really critical moments for him over these next, several issues here of him truly accepting who he is right now. And I think that's as much the story as the journey aspect of it, if you will.
And there's you said earlier, there is the one line where he says that this, is giving him a gift. All of this is really giving him a gift, and it's pain. And this comes up a lot in this comic, and we've talked about this. But the pain itself is something that's, it's almost like a lesson for Palpatine in teaching Vader that this is where he needs to be focused. This is where he needs to be tapping into. Because it's going to make him powerful in the long run. And it's actually going to be one of the crucial, most essential elements for him in order to get his red kyber crystal, which we'll, get to here in a little bit. But, throughout the comic book, the relationship, at least this first six issues, and it doesn't change, trust me, beyond this, but we do get more of what we talked about in that last episode where we were talking about the first run, where we get a Palpatine who's very abusive. He's condescending. He seems to interchange the word friend with the meaning of slave almost at will. Right. He torments him or constantly calls him and refers to him as friend. So again, sorry, I don't want to rehash everything, but it's more of the building him up, breaking him down, building him up, breaking him down. And we get more of what we know to expect from Palpatine. But the art the artwork in here, it just makes it even more sinister, more sadistic, because he's just constantly smiling, like he's truly enjoying all of this. And through it all, we get more of the sense really that Vader is just a tool, right? He is that blunt instrument that we heard Mahdi talking about in the first comic book series as well. I mean, this is, him saying it though. I think also just kind of really quickly on that relationship between Palpatine and Vader, throughout this series and especially in this arc, we see, that deep pain, the pure emotion, the pure rage. There's a lot of passion that we see from Vader in a lot of these shots and some of the stories, and all of that kind of piggybacks on episode 257, where we were talking about at the core, the Sith ultimately rely on that passion and the power and the emotion to be able to kind of control and bend the Force to their will. So this is all kind of playing into, Vader and developing him and making him stronger. And I think part of it is Palpatine is doing it on purpose, right? He's trying to get this person to tap into all of that so he can become, a more powerful Sith, a more powerful master of the Force kind of thing.
Right. And to bring it back, Code of the Sith, you talk about breaking chains, and we start to see Anakin's chains of limiting himself. And there's even a quote in there, "I have no limits. I'm not a Jedi. I have no limits." But you see that he doesn't have to hold himself back anymore. And so we start to see the true brutality of Darth Vader coming through in some of these scenes, especially in like issue 2 and issue 4 and 5, where he doesn't hold it back. He doesn't hold it back anymore. He will do whatever he wants, and he will relish in that moment. And so it's crazy to think that a week ago, this was a caring Jedi who was going to have a family and was hoping to put an end to a war. And now you have this character who is donned in black armor, who just wants to rain absolute hell on the galaxy.
Yeah, and there was one other thing too that I think that that kind of it's there, it's obvious, but I think it was brought to light as I was reading through this particular arc. But we've got basically Vader here, arguably at his lowest point in his life. Right, he's completely bottomed out. He's broken. He's angry. He's enslaved in a lot of ways, physically, mentally, emotionally. He's still very young. He's very naive if you think about his age at that time when he turns. And there are still parts of Anakin that I think are still in him, and we're going to see that a little bit later,
right?
With the Kyber crystal. But he has nothing to live for, and he has nothing to die for. He has really no purpose at this point. And I guess maybe a question to you is, what is his purpose? Is it just merely to survive, or do you think that, going back to the, I was thinking, does he have a purpose here that he doesn't even know about yet later, where he's going to start meticulously trying to figure out, how do I kill this dude, him being the Emperor? But he just seems like a man with, again, nothing to lose. This is like the most dangerous you can be when you don't care about anything. But it's a very interesting perspective, I think, for Vader that I don't think we really get to touch on much, because this part of the at least from canon, has been pretty non-existent until this comic book came out.
Right. I had the same question come when I was reading this book. Like, what is driving him right now? Because everything has been ripped away from him. Everything he thought he knew and what the dark side was supposed to be able to afford him has just completely fallen out. His body is in shambles. And I don't know about you, later on when we see him in the Bacta tank and they drew this so beautifully, and it's so, man, it's beautiful, but it's really disturbing at the same time, where you just see his stumps, and if you just try to imagine that, it's like the old Metallica 1 video. You just can't imagine. You just have absolutely no ability to do things on your own anymore. And so you're right. I think this is the absolute bottom, but I don't know. It's confusing me, like how someone could find a way to live except to punish everybody and to make everyone. It's this concept of revenge, of payback, and that he will rule the galaxy in his way, and he's going to start turning that around now. And this book, I thought, did a good job of not always making it seem like he worshipped his master, or this relationship that we had an idea for in the movies that was more respectful. And even Palpatine in this book said, we'll rule the galaxy as one, which I thought was a really odd line for him as well. And again, more manipulation. But Vader clearly doesn't believe any of this anymore.
Yeah.
And Palpatine is now a tool for him as well, I believe. But there doesn't seem to be any learning going on at this point anymore, except for learning the Sith ways and what it means to be a Sith, breaking his old Jedi habits, if you will. But yeah, it was a great question. And the same thing kind of came up in my head of what would drive him at this lowest point, especially, when your armor is not, he calls the armor, he pauses and calls it acceptable. And so we know, right. So we know that the armor is the furthest from acceptable, and we see its shortcomings as well. And it's the frustrations I imagine that Anakin has of remembering again a week ago all of the abilities that he had, and now it's more about what he can't do. And so he's just going to make everyone, pay for that.
And there was just want to make a quick note. There was an interview that was done with Charles Soule when the series was announced. And he mentioned that we'd get to see Vader kind of double down on the dark side because he knows there's a bit of good of him still, and that was his way of coping with it, right? So he acknowledges that Anakin is still in there, and so how best to stamp it out than to just really kind of go all in on the dark side. And we don't get that until kind of the very end, and then from this point we do. But there's certainly shades of it and moments of it within this particular arc that we see that happen. But I think especially when I'm just thinking about the flooding later, right? The vision, and then certainly with the flooding of the Ambalar city,
right?
Which we'll come back to. So, but let's move on, because I think one of the really cool things, and more controversial, I think there was at least a lot of discussion, a lot of heat about it when it first was kind of mentioned, or when that comic came out. I think it was issue number 4 or 5. But this is the backstory really about the Sith kyber crystals, and how the Sith were able to make the kyber crystals bleed. And then specifically here with this arc, we kind of get some backstory on how he goes about getting his particular lightsaber. Now, this isn't something new for the comic. We'd first heard about this in the Ahsoka novel. In fact, we actually heard the inverse of this as well, because in the Ahsoka novel, she goes on to explain that they can actually heal the crystals, and that's how she is able to get the white crystals that she got. One of which came from, was it Brother 6, I believe?
One of the brothers.
One of the Inquisitors, which, funny enough, in the next arc, he's actually in that. So, but anyways, so right. So the whole bleeding and healing of crystals, it was kind of really dropped in the Ahsoka novel. This is where we're kind of finally getting another mention of it, and then we're actually going to, get to see it a little bit later.
So what did you think about that when you first learned about this was the direction they were taking?
I didn't really have an opinion. I guess the question I had, and I'll kind of throw it out there now, was really, apart from the aesthetics, I mean, do you feel like there was anything else that they got from the process of, making this crystal bleed? Because if not, then what's the problem, right? What's the problem? I don't like it. I like it. I don't have a problem with it, really. I mean, I
think it adds lore to it, actually.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's just fleshing something out. Because before, what was the alternative? They went out and found a crystal.
Yeah, it's no different than the Jedi, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so what better way of doing this than to take a Jedi's weapon and then corrupt the soul of the blade, if you will, and bend it to your will and make it bleed. I thought the bleeding, and it was more of an analogy than anything else, because it was just a way to visualize what was actually happening. Pouring your pain, pouring your anger, pouring everything into this thing that has living qualities of sorts, right? And I thought it was just a great way to help us visualize this process and to really, continue on this corruption mentality and this corruption way of thinking with the dark side in general.
Yeah. I don't really have a problem with it. Here's something else though. Here's a question. And I know this may have come up. I don't know if we've ever talked about it either. Well, I don't think we've ever talked about it on the air, and I don't think we've ever maybe talked about it in Discord, but do you think this could explain Kylo's fractured kyber crystal? Like, do you think there's any chance that he tried to go through this process himself and either he couldn't complete it, or, he had a moment of weakness greater than what we saw here with Vader, and because of that fractured his kyber crystal, and that's why he had to have the hilt with the exhaust that fire outside?
I think that's a very real possibility, and I think it would be very... I think this is something they could actually put into episode 9 and confirm that if they wanted to, if they felt it was really necessary for the story. But you're right, because this fits that mold exactly. In the process, it didn't go right because he's torn between two worlds. His soul is split now in particular. And I imagine it's probably always been split between what he knows is right and the frustrations of the same environment, the same world, and all the things that he's grown up with. So I think that would be a great explanation for why his blade is so unique and so this angry, fiery, spitting type of quality.
Yeah.
I think that'd be great to see and actually hear and get confirmation of. Yeah,
it would be cool. And there was another cool moment there, I guess, with regards to the backstory of his lightsaber, and that. So again, he ends up reaching out, or ends up going to a planet that we'll come to in just a minute here. He finds a Jedi by the name of Kirak, and he takes his, eventually gets a lightsaber, right? Spoiler alert, we're getting there. But he'll eventually take the lightsaber from him. And I thought it was cool because I was fully expecting that within this arc, we would see him construct his new hilt, and we don't. You don't get that until a little bit later.
Right.
I think it's 2 arcs from now. Or maybe it's the next one. But either way, it was kind of cool because from that point on, he's kind of running around with this really slick looking, hilt,
nice.
With the red blade on it, which I thought was kind of cool. So but let's get to you want to kick us off on the legacy of the Jedi here? And
this was just, it was brief. It was a little bit brief. So as Palpatine, again, this is still in the first issue, as Palpatine is explaining to Vader, kind of what it means to be Sith, we see Masameda presenting the lightsabers into a giant cauldron to be burned and to basically be disposed of. And, they will forever be, removed from the Jedi tyranny ever again, all due to the Emperor. And of course, the Emperor is laughing at them of sorts of, they just don't understand. But we see Yoda's lightsaber. And so we have confirmation that it was actually destroyed. We have this giant, brilliant blue flame kind of out of nowhere when they ignite. But again, we just get this epilogue of what the perception of the Jedi of, is with the galaxy, and how they were made out to be this evil, plotting, unit of this group that just doesn't adhere to the law. And they were rogue, and they wanted to do harm to the galaxy. And, Emperor Palpatine is going to save everybody and make everyone, happy again. And it was all their fault. But then we also see a little bit later on, as we get into like what Jedi still exist. But the Barash vow or Barash vow was something that I don't think we had seen this before in canon, right?
No.
Concept of an exile type of situation.
Right. No, not officially. And here's something else, and maybe you can answer this, because I don't think I got a conclusive answer whether or not this was this what Luke had done? Because even so, we know that, so basically the Barash vow is where a Jedi kind of leaves, goes into exile, and, refuses to kind of participate in anything from the Jedi Order. And it's a way for them to kind of cleanse himself almost, right? Spiritually, mentally, that kind of thing. And then whenever they're ready, whatever that is, they may come back to the Jedi Order. But here, I never got any confirmation of whether or not this was something that Luke went through in what we saw in The Last Jedi. And if so, he had to have gone through some kind of more intense variant of it, because with Master Kilik, or that's Kirik and Fila, he was able to sense the destruction of all, or the killing of all the Jedi as part of Order 66. And we know that I guess it's safe to assume in little bits and pieces that we've got from the novel that Luke really have found a way to completely cut himself off, right? He couldn't he couldn't feel anything. No one could feel him. So it seems like I don't know if it's been confirmed that this is exactly the same vow that Luke took in The Last Jedi, or prior to The Last Jedi, prior to The Force Awakens, really. Or if this was, is it something different? Is it something the same? Or is it just a variant of that's more intense because he was able to kind of do a hard cut from everything that was out there?
Right. I think it's a very distinct difference. I think the Barash vow, the intent and the purpose of it is to meditate on the Force, learn the Force. It's meant to correct your path, I guess. And they didn't really clarify this in the comic about what he did to take this vow. It seems like it would be something not desirable that you had done, that you have to go and kind of rethink your life, right? You don't want these death sticks type of thing. But so I think this is very different than what Luke did with Last Jedi, I think, and Force Awakens. I think that was more of him disavowing the Force of sorts and completely removing himself, not wanting to learn more, waiting for his path to be opened up to him by the Force, and then reclaiming your place in the galaxy and reclaiming your place in the Order. I don't view it as that. You could probably interpret it that way with the way that Last Jedi ended, and that you might be able to formulate an argument there. But I think from a strict, pure type of perspective, the Barash vow, I think, is very much something happened to where you have to take this exile, but you are supposed to focus in the Force. You are supposed to be one with it, learn it, understand it better, so that you can be a better Jedi overall. You are still a Jedi. You're just not participating in the Order at large.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, and I think that's fair. It's almost like a penance, I guess, to some extent. But then I say that, and then
and that's what Vader called it. Actually, he called it was a penance of sorts. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's probably a more logical explanation and difference.
I liked it because that was a great way for Vader to track one down. And I thought that was a great touchstone where that makes sense that Anakin would understand that type of scenario to where he could go find one, and Palpatine didn't lay it out for him. And Vader, pulled on that knowledge from his former life to be able to do it. So I thought that was a nice touch of how did you know where to find someone? And that was a really great way of doing that.
When you got to, here's something else too that I thought was just a real a-hole move on Palpatine's part. He has a list, right?
Yeah.
Of Jedi out there.
And what does he do? Yeah.
He gives them the freaking hardest, most difficult person to start with. He doesn't break this guy in slowly. He sends them to the big cheese of all of them and says, here's your first mission. Go kill this guy and take his lightsaber. because I do want to just really quickly talk about Master Kirak and Fila, because he's a total badass, and I loved him. He reminded me a lot of a character like from like if you've ever played Samurai Showdown, the video game. He looked like one of those samurai that was just kind of standing there with his hair in a bun, no shirt on, no shirt on, and just whatever hakimas on the across his waist. But he's labeled as one of these true combat masters. Like he is supposed to be the definitive person when it comes to lightsaber combat. On par maybe with like a Mace Windu or something.
Right. He only had one duty in the order, and that was to fight.
Yeah, that was the fight, right? They sent this guy in. He was the muscle of the Jedi Order. In fact, I think there's one line in there where he says he's unique even for a Jedi. Apparently, Master and Fila had precisely one purpose within the Order: to fight, and that was Vader's droid giving him the pep talk before he landed on the planet. But I love the fact that he was like super in tune with the Force. Right, he was able to not only sense that Vader had landed, but he had foresight to know that what was about to happen, because he tells Apex, the droid, to, hey, you need to get out of here because things are about to get rough. And then he just proceeds to kick Vader's butt down one side of Mount Pasval or whatever it's called and up the other. I mean, he hurls him to his death down in the valley below, and then after all that's said and done, I mean, the entire time he's taunting him. We'll come back to this in just a little bit, but entire time he's taunting him, as he's kicking his butt. And then he tells him, after I'm done with you, son, I'm going after your boy, your master, right? And I'm going to kick his butt.
Because you're weak.
I thought, this is because you're weak, right? But this is the kind of Jedi character that I just love it, because it's uncharacteristic of what we see and maybe know from other canon characters, especially. Maybe in the Legends, there's probably some characters that kind of float close to this line. But I just thought he was a really cool character that, unfortunately, we probably won't ever get to see more of him.
But what was interesting, though, is that this also continues to show the overconfidence of the Jedi, even in the face of complete annihilation.
Right. Yeah.
It's
I got nobody else, but I'm going to take care of this myself.
Yeah. And we'll rebuild. We're good. Yeah. No worries. But yeah, he had great dialogue too, like the stink of the dark side. And, and it was just great. He was a really cool character. And you're right. He definitely reminded me of these video game characters that we grew up with, even with like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and these types of things.
He was the boss level, right?
He was one of the big bads.
All right. So let's talk about Mustafar. And we don't have a lot here. We'll definitely have more to talk about this in the next comic book show that we do. But we've got this listed as Mystery of Mustafar. But so this gets explained, or at least it's expanded upon later in the series, in that Vader Fortress arc. But we do get some inklings, or at least a mention here, that Mustafar is steeped in the dark side of the Force. I think we kind of all known that through a couple of different sources here and there.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot, but we get Palpatine being a total jerkface yet again, because he sends Vader, after he gets the lightsaber, he sends him over to the place of his greatest defeat. And, how pathetic must it be to have your boss tell you, okay, now that, you're going to have to go back to where you lost your limbs and nearly died. And then later on, even more of a jerk face, he tells him, oh, and by the way, you're going to set up camp there and live out the rest of your life there on the planet.
Thanks, Dad.
But it was interesting, because in that moment, in that panel, we do get a sense that the Sith had been here before. We've got the hieroglyphs on the sides of the cave that Vader enters. There's some really good imagery on this particular issue. This is number
issue 5.
5. Thank you. Yeah. There's some really good full page imagery when he's going through this whole process of entering that cave and then, attempting to make the kyber crystal bleed and all that. But yeah, so again, we'll come back to this a little bit later, but yeah, there definitely is a lot more. I think I really think they've only just touched the surface really with Mustafar in terms of just how deep and how steep that its Sith background goes.
Right. And Palpatine's dialogue here, again, it calls back to the code of the Sith as well, and also has some flavor of what we had with Snoke and Kylo Ren in Last Jedi. So from the site of your greatest defeat, you shall rise strong, unbroken, powerful. And he's urging him, teach the kyber crystal his pain, teach it your anger. And so it was interesting to use the word teach, but I just thought this dialogue was just so expertly written that calls on these different source materials, both past and future, to kind of build us this picture of what it means to, break your chains, achieve victory, power, and accumulate power, and to come out the other side, victorious and just more powerful than ever. And it just spoke to each of those things all the way from, thousands of years previous to what'll happen, 40 years down the road.
So let's also talk about the armor, because really, and I'll kind of jump ahead here, but I mentioned earlier on, kind of when we kicked this whole show off, that the original, the arc is called The Chosen One, but when they collected the novels, it was called The Imperial Machine, and Imperial Machine kind of makes more sense. What's that?
Pretty fitting, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty fitting, right, for him. This particular arc, we do get a lot of the quote, "He's more machine than man" now.
Yeah.
And there are some really neat moments in here. So at one point in the comic, when he makes his way and ascends Mount Pasval to confront Master Kirak and Fila, he does run into Arex, the Jedi droid, who's kind of like this training droid. He ends up, this is Vader, he confronts him, defeats a droid by literally ripping his arm off, and then he takes the saber that he's using and uses that to fight Master Kirak. But in that process, after he kills Arex, he throws Arex off this mountain, and Arex plunges down below and blows up and turns into a million pieces or whatever. But there's a really interesting moment here, I think, and it's one of my favorite moments, honestly, where after he gets his butt kicked by Master and Fila, he gets thrown down there as well, gets thrown off the cliff, force pushed off the cliff, and lands right next to this droid. He's literally on death's bed.
Yeah. And
by the power of the Force, sheer will to live, he ends up using a lot of his engineering skills and robot building, I guess, for lack of a better term, to kind of rebuild himself. He repurposes himself with the armor that came from Arex, the droid that's kind of just a few feet away from him where he landed, which I thought was a really kind of a neat and interesting perspective. And I think it shows a lot of Vader's resiliency.
Right.
It shows a lot of his resourcefulness. And it certainly ties into the whole hero's journey, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Well, what was really cool too is just even when he's ascending the mountain, you see his exposed leg, and you start to, and again, you hear the more machine than man in your head as you read through this book, and when he's down on that rock, his hand is in this really odd position. Just things are popping out of the back of his hand. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think there's even one scene where it's calling back to Luke and Jedi, where you can see the back of his hand is exposed, like what happened to Luke on the sail barge, right? And but yeah, just to see his engineering and his ingenuity to strip the droid of its parts as it's talking to him, and he to save his own life was incredible, and to kind of build himself up a little bit better than he was before, because Kirak just took him apart, cut off his leg, and just chastised him the entire way.
But, yeah, I mean, he literally loses his legs again. At one point, he's just standing, and Fila's standing right over him, holding a saber to his throat, and he's sitting there with no legs, basically, no calf or nothing from the knees below, because he's lost them, completely destroyed. And it kind of that plays a little bit into the armor piece, and we get to that, I think, in this series, if not the next one, where we come to find out that Palpatine's like, yeah, your armor, it's cool, but if you want to do something more with it, go right ahead. I gave you the base model kind of thing.
Right.
But we definitely see it get pretty much, I mean, he's really destroyed by this point, and especially after he's thrown off this cliff. He's, again, rock bottom, no pun intended.
Right. Yeah. With Palpatine, Palpatine was actually offering to repair it for Vader, and he got pissed. and of course, Palpatine backed off. Oh, you're right. It's, you should, explore your engineering ingenuity and make it your own. Who else better suited?
So let's do this. Let's talk about now. I want to get to the dream sequence, I guess, for lack of a better term. So we're a little bit further in the comic. This is, Vader's comes back and he ends up kind of winning, and we'll come back to that a little bit later in this show. But after he gets the lightsaber, or he gets the crystal and the lightsaber, goes back to Mustafar, is in the tunnel. He has a dream sequence that was very interesting when, obviously when you read it for the first time, because you're kind of taken aback.
Right.
And really the way the story goes is, he's in there, he's got the crystal, and he tries to go through this process of making this green crystal bleed. And as he's going through it, suddenly the crystal starts to light up. It kind of backfires, for lack of a better term. He gets thrown back. And the next scene that we see him, his eye's exposed, and we can see it's Anakin's eye. He doesn't. No longer has like the Vader-ish yellow eyes or any of that stuff. It looks like Anakin, and he's got a line there. I think he says, "What have I done?" Right. It's almost like he's been snapped out of this whole persona of trance of Vader, and now he's Anakin again. And so the very next scene is, I think we're back on Coruscant, and Vader walks in, and Palpatine's sitting there, and the Emperor asks him, "Hey, did you complete your job?" And he just ignites the green lightsaber, and so you get this like sick smile on Palpatine's face because he knows that he wasn't able to go through it. I think he makes, and you probably have the dialogue, but he makes a comment in there about how he was weak or whatever, and they get into a lightsaber duel, ending with Vader slashing the Emperor's throat or mouth. I mean, there's blood of some type, and kills him, lays him out to dead there. He then leaves Coruscant, runs off, and goes to confront Obi-Wan. Removes his helmet. He approaches Obi-Wan, who seems to be out on some kind of beautiful world somewhere.
Right.
And Obi-Wan ignites his lightsaber, is about to kill him, and then turns his lightsaber off. And it's at that moment you realize that this really was a dream, and none of that really happened. So let me pause there before we go to the next part. But how did you feel about all of that? Because it was, again, the very first time you read it, you're not really expecting it. You're thinking, what the heck is happening here?
Yeah, it was a little off-putting. I had to figure out what it was trying to do. And what really, as soon as he goes to Palpatine and kills him, you know, okay, this is not real.
Yeah.
But what was really interesting was with Obi-Wan, that was the time where you see it's not Tatooine. And so even whatever the force projection that this crystal is doing, it still wasn't showing him any kind of reality. And the question I had for you was to see was it trying to show him a path that was real, or was it trying to confuse him, or what was I'm assuming that the crystal was trying to tell him something, or it was just trying to dissuade him and give him doubt so that he would fail. Did you take that same meaning, or did you find another meaning with it?
I think for me, and honestly, I've not looked into whether or not Souls come out and debunked anything one way or the other, but I think my interpretation of this was the crystal was showing him the path that he should take. And the reason I say that is because once he snaps out of this vision, his very next line is, "No, I refuse. This is all there is." Right. This being all the pain, the hurt, the anger, the passion.
This is reality.
And that's this is the reality. None of that's real. All of that's fake. It's never going to happen. This is the only thing that's real, what I'm feeling right now. And that was enough, spurred on by we get some flashbacks in this comic of his mom, him carrying Shmi back from the Tusken Raider camp. Obviously Padme, we've got a couple of shots in there of Mustafar and Obi-Wan, right? That whole thing, all of that just kind of leads up.
And even Palpatine was in there the very last panel.
Yep. Mr. McJerkface himself, right? All of that leads up to Vader finally getting enough rage and pain, passion, that kind of thing to really make this crystal bleed. So I think it was trying to show him, hey, this is, the future that you can have, and him shunning it away. This is him doubling down, again, like Sewell mentioned, on trying to suppress any and all good that he had in himself. And, we obviously get that a little bit later because Luke's able to discern it. And, we get that exchange between him and his son about, whether or not they're still good in him. So, from that point on, he's got, he makes his crystal bleed. He gets a red crystal. He goes back, and Vader looks pretty happy because he ignites it. It's red. And Vader, there's a really cool exchange in there where he just says, master or apprentice, and he says master, right? So it's almost like a confirmation of, I've done it. I've transformed. I'm yours wholeheartedly. What is it that you wish at this point, kind of thing. From that point on, we do get one little piece, and this is going to carry more into the next arc, but we do get a really kind of cool setup with the Inquisitors, because they do make mention that now that Vader's back and he has his red lightsaber, his next task that Palpatine gives him in this arc is to put him in contact with the Inquisitors and basically tells them, this is your team. You need to train these guys because I've got a mission now for you, and this is going to be, it's crucial. We need to go out and weed out all of these Jedi that were able to slip through Order 66, and you're going to exterminate them one by one. And here's the force that you're going to use. So we get some backstory here about the Inquisitors that were, they were once Jedi that either fallen or churned for whatever reason. They've obviously been training either themselves or with Palpatine or somehow, because most of them have red lightsabers. We kind of see them in their training quarters early on, but that's kind of, this is really the big setup for what we see in Rebels, obviously,
right?
And then this is a big setup for what we see coming up in the next story arc, where they start trying to systematically go through and exterminate all of the last remaining Jedi that didn't die as a result of Order 66.
Yeah, it was a decent way of linking it to other material with Rebels. The story itself, the only thing that was a little bit interesting was the giving Vader that doubt that, because he had a brief interaction with the brother or with the Grand Inquisitor rather, but, and he questions Palpatine, what if he would have won? He was going to replace me? And they have this kind of odd, short-lived dialogue of, was that ever in any doubt though? And of course, Vader says no. So,
right.
But again, you get that little bit of a hint of doubt that Vader's always got in the back of his head that there's always someone in the wings that Palpatine is waiting to supplement him with.
Yeah, and this is another one. I know Sewell, the Lucasfilm story group is credited at the very beginning of the comics, and we didn't really mention that. But if you look at the very bottom, they are listed there. I think Matt Martin's in there.
Yeah, Matt Martin.
Leland Chee, and I forget who the third one is. But I know Sewell worked with them, the Lucasfilm story group, just to ensure that, as he was setting all this up, that it aligned nicely with what we saw already in Rebels, and some of it with the Ahsoka novel with the Sixth Brother and all that. But I think this Jedi hunt, though, overall, I think it makes total sense as far as I'm concerned, because I think this is how they would have probably gone about it, right? It's a good way of introducing the fact that there were Jedi that did live, or able to successfully escape in some way, but it's not because this would have been really easy to water down the power and the effectiveness of Palpatine's plan by saying that there were hundreds of Jedi out there,
right,
and that were able to survive, and that's not really what we have here. We get not in this series, but in the next arc, we get more of a definitive list, and it's not huge, it's not insurmountable, but it is a pretty good number given that there were thousands of Jedi at the time of Order 66. So you got to expect that some of them, there's some variable in there that were able to kind of slip through the cracks, and so I think this makes all sense. I don't really have a problem with it at all. I think it's a smart way to kind of handle that. And it gives Vader something to do, something to hone his skills, more ways, interesting ways for him to kind of figure out who he is, how to, compensate for the lack of prowess that he has, because now he's more machine than man.
Right.
But I think we get all of that, and you are going to get a lot of that in this particular comic as it kind of plays out. So I was pretty happy, I guess, that they kind of threw this in. All that said, helicopter lightsabers notwithstanding, but
right. It's important, and it's important to note that Palpatine still views the Jedi as perhaps his greatest threat. So anyone that lives can rekindle the Order and bring the whole thing crashing down. So it's still very important that's at the forefront of their concern.
Yep. All right. So I guess the only question, and I mentioned this earlier, was whether or not the title was kind of misleading, because the title of this arc is the Chosen One, and I think when a couple years ago when this thing was announced, I heard this was going to be the name of it, and I'm thinking, wow, this is great. We're going to get something to do with the prophecy, and really, there's not anything in here about the prophecy. So I don't know if it's just a name they kind of threw out there and said, "Oh, we'll call it the Chosen One." I mean, obviously he is, and it makes sense that you would name something after him. That's fine. It's his comic book. But were you kind of misled, or did you feel like that they could have done a better job with coming up with a name here?
It's an interesting name. You could have used other words like legacy, and I think that would have worked just as well. I see the Chosen One moniker here as almost used somewhat tongue in cheek. It's meant to elicit. It's kind of more from Palpatine's view, where he's almost spitting it in Anakin's face of sorts, and that's how I took it. But you're right. When it was announced, we had a very different vision for how this story we thought was going to play out. We knew it was going to pick up right after Sith. and we knew we were going to see this immediate, shift and change, but we thought it would be a little more, I don't want to say cerebral, but, along the lines of the spiritual kind of journey. And it definitely was, but not in the way that we thought it was. And what's not as clear is if this is the actual direction of the chosen one, or again, is it just a way of, Palpatine basically rubbing in Anakin's nose, and now Vader's knows that, he's not the chosen one, chosen to be responsible later on, I guess. But
right.
But yeah, not quite aligned with what I think we thought we were going to get. But I got to say, man, this story was so smooth. It's not often you have an arc of a comic book that is so smooth and very linear, but also just very connected. It just worked. It flowed really nicely. And it was really refreshing to read that, because so many books in an arc will still jump all over the place.
Right.
And so in the title, notwithstanding, I thought Imperial Machine worked a lot better on, kind of multiple planes.
No, I agree there. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because this does read this particular arc. If you have not had a chance to read it, go out and get it, because it's one of the better, definitely one of the better Star Wars arcs I think we've ever had, honestly. And I'm not just saying that. There's some stuff in Poe Dameron that's probably just as good, if not better. But in terms of just comic book writing, it's great. And here's a rule, and we'll kind of end on this because it's a fun little thing that I was going to put together for the show. I think the reason why this arc works really well is because it almost follows beat per beat the monomyth, which is the hero's journey. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly run through these, and you just kind of shout out to me. And if you don't got the answer, I got to hear. But I'm going to ask you what parts of the comic book these kind of fit. So we'll run through the whole hero's journey cycle, right? So this is, again, Joseph Campbell and the whole hero's journey monomyth arcs or the beats. But you tell me where and when this happened in the comic. So the first one is the call to adventure.
I guess the challenge to find the saber. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So right. So hero receives a mysterious message or a quest or challenge. I should have given you that part, but so he gets, his mission, the challenge is to go out and find the lightsaber.
Right.
The next one, assistance or meeting the mentor. So the hero receives some help from someone older or wiser. Yeah,
this is probably Palpatine up front.
Yep. And then I thought maybe to some extent that stupid Imperial probe droid that was
a little
telling
bit.
him, coaching him, I guess, a little bit here and there.
A bit.
All right. Departure or crossing the threshold and into the belly of the whale. The hero leaves for his destination from his normal world into an unknown world.
Yeah, that was probably the moment he stepped on the mountain.
Yeah. Or entered that planet, right? Or into this realm, this domain of this master, combat
as soon
Jedi.
As Infila sensed him, basically.
Exactly. This one's pretty easy. The Road of Trials. The Road of Trials is a series of tests that the hero must undergo to begin the transformation.
Yeah, I mean, getting his ass kicked. For the most part.
And we had 3 trials, right? Because the first, he actually, we didn't really touch on this, but there is a moment where he confronts Infila here, and he says, "Hey, I'm going to go to the top of the mountain. If you can make it up there, I'll meet you there and then whoop your butt," right? And so he leaves, and then Vader actually does have to go through trials. The first one is, I think he gets flooded with a whole bunch of water, and then he uses a force to literally part the sea, so to speak. The second trial, I think, is the Raptorans, and he starts breaking their beaks with the Force and kills them, right? And then there's a moment in there where Arex is like, "Hey, do you want me to keep this going?" And Infila's like, "Nope, that's fine. Just let him come to the top. I'm ready for this. I'm ready to get this going." So he does have to go through literally a set of at least 2 trials that we know of from the comic book in order to get to the top of the mountain just to fight him.
Right.
All right. The next one, the woman as a temptress. So this is the abyss, or the death and rebirth of the character.
Yeah, this would be the Kyber crystal moment.
Kyber crystal. How about the moment where he is thrown from the cliff, lands, and is on death's bed, right? And then he rebuilds himself. His rebirth is the pulling of the armor pieces from Arex onto him.
I think literally that works, but I think more on the spiritual side, I think the Kyber crystal might fit that one a touch better.
All right.
Because he had to completely denounce everything at that point and adopt a completely new path.
All right, we're looking at the judges, and yes, we will take that answer. So
thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex. Atonement for the Father of the Abyss. So this is in this step, the hero must confront and be initiated by whatever holds the ultimate power in his life. In many myths, this is the father figure who has who holds life and death power over them. It's the center point of the journey.
Yeah, I mean, this the continuation from the Kyber crystal and presenting it to Palpatine, and now the great work can continue of purging the Jedi.
So here was my interpretation of this. I saw this as Obi-Wan in that vision, like the father figure, right? Yeah. He sees him. He's this. He was actually holding that, and he was telling him, or the Kyber crystal was saying, this is kind of what this is maybe the ultimate power in your life. This is the center point of your journey. I think he shuns that. I think he turns away from it. But I thought that's kind of how I interpreted it, because the next part of it was the hypothesis, and this is the point of realization in which a greater understanding is achieved. And I saw that as him turning away and saying, no, this is all there is. This is where the transformation began for him, because from that moment on, he was now going to pledge his allegiance fully to the dark side, fully to the Emperor. Obviously, which we'll see a little bit later, or as we talked about when he confronts Emperor and ignites his red lightsaber.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think this is one of those times where also the literal path and the literal hero's journey don't always necessarily have to apply. I'm not sure I'm quite following on the Obi-Wan part, because it just wasn't real, and we don't really. It just wasn't possible either. Vader would not have defeated Palpatine. The scenario wouldn't be there. But I could see on the surface, though, or not on the surface, but I could see why that would potentially align with that aspect of it, though.
This one's an easy one. The ultimate boon. So the ultimate boon is the achievement of the goal in the quest, basically the treasure.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Crystal, right? Yep. He's got the crystal.
Yeah. Present the saber. Yeah.
Yep. The crossing of the threshold. So the trick in returning to retain the wisdom gained on the quest. He then returns and crosses the threshold once again and returns to his normal world. Yep. So this is, him coming back to Coruscant,
right?
Going back to Palpatine. And then the last phase is the master of two worlds. So represents a new life, a complete transformation. And this is kind of where I felt like, him saying apprentice and showing the red saber, and Palpatine simply responding with master.
Yep.
Or I think Vader I had that vice versa.
Yep.
Yeah, Vader, sorry. I think that's him saying he knows his place now.
Yep. He's accepted his new reality. Yep.
Right. So anyways, the point of that was
that's
just
pretty
that
cool. Yeah.
It does follow the hero's journey almost like a beat per beat, with some variances and interpretations that you can make one way or the other. But nonetheless, I mean, I don't know if he went out on a path to really ensure that this story fit the hero's journey model. But if he didn't, that's what happened. And I think that's why taking it back to what you said and what kind of started all of this was, it just really reads really well. There's a lot of great elements in this, and it's because we're kind of hitting on all these tried and true storytelling elements that we've seen in a number of other story arcs that involve a hero, or in this case, an anti-hero. So,
well, that was always Joseph Campbell's firm belief, was that the myths and this core mythology of this journey makes for fantastic storytelling. You'll always have things like this, and no matter how you plug things into it, it will always work. And will always be interesting, and there'll always be truths to it. There'll always be things that you can pull from it. So it's really cool that you can apply this even in more of a villain setting.
All right. Well, before we get to the last part, I think you got a couple shout outs here. I think you've been racking up, and we haven't had a chance to really say thank you to some very specific people, but you've got a few here that you've got in the blocks.
Yeah, I've got a handful here. Corey reached out to us. He's been a longtime listener. Was sending us some congratulations on Celebration. Loves the discussion. I want to give him a shout out. Stargate Pioneer from the Better Podcasting podcast, who's effectively one of our mentors. They've given us a couple of shout outs for the Pandora thing on Better Podcasting. So if you're interested in podcasting, check out Better Podcasting. They're fantastic. The folks over at All Star Wars Fans, the guys over at Comics with Kenobi, Ryan on Twitter, who's always pimping the podcast on Fridays. Thanks for that. Tyson, Matt, Waylon, Kevin. There's so many others that send us great comments on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and just wanted to give everyone a quick shout out. Thank you for listening. Thanks for sharing. We really do appreciate it. It means a lot to us.
Yeah, thank you guys. I don't think you threw Neil in there, but let's throw him in there as well.
Let's throw Neil too.
From Twitter, yeah. So yeah, thank you guys for all of that. It's just humbling to hear the good words and all that for the show.
Yeah, and if you want to hear someone go through comics with Kenobi is your show, man. They do a fantastic job of going panel by panel.
Oh wow, yeah. I don't listen to them, and that's only a time thing. It's not a preference thing or anything like that. But
yeah, they're awesome.
I've heard lots of good things about them. Yep. And then I've got just one quick one. So I want to say thank you to Tim Spalding. He is a fellow Star Wars podcaster. And thank you to the rest of the crew out there at Star Wars and Character. They've been doing a show out for nearly as long as the Cantina Cast. But Tim Spalding is one of the hosts on that show. He actually does a radio broadcast out of Nashville on WRFM. He does a show called Rock 101 every Monday night at 10 p.m. where he kind of just brings in a lot of different music. Rock music. Sometimes it's not rock music. Sometimes it's country. Sometimes it's blues. But he just plays a lot of it. It was really a huge inspiration for me when we were doing Cantina Radio on Discord. So The Secret's Out, that's kind of where that was my inspiration for that one, as short-lived as that was. But he does a great job out there. But anyways, the other night he gave a shout out to our show, Cantina Cast, and went so far as to say, hey, whenever you're not listening to Star Wars and Character, you guys, you should be listening over to the Cantina Cast. So
wow, cool.
I'm just returning the plug. Thank you, Tim, for doing that. And thank you for any and all listeners that we may have gotten from that, because it's much appreciated, and certainly didn't have to do it. It was unexpected, but definitely appreciated.
And they've got such a fun show. Yeah, definitely recommend people go check it out.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
That's one of my favorites. All right. Well, with that, that's going to do it. We'll wrap it up. And coming back next week, we are going to hit The Last Jedi 1 year later. So we'll do a retrospective view on The Last Jedi, kind of talk about where things are, the state of The Last Jedi, if you will. Now that it's been out for a full year, it'll be pretty close to it by the time the show airs. And then after that, we'll end it with a kind of a Resistance recap on the first half of the season before they break for the holidays. So that'll be a fun thing to do, because we really haven't had a chance to talk much Resistance, and it's turning out to be, in my opinion, a really good show.
Yeah, starting to warm up a little bit.
All right, anything before we go?
No, thanks to everybody. We appreciate it. We love you guys. We'll see you next week.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.